He was the man America trusted to end their day with laughter, a charming presence behind a desk, armed with wit sharper than a razor and timing that could silence a room. But when the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Johnny Carson became someone else entirely. For 3 decades, he was the king of late night, the voice of reason, humor, and calm in an unpredictable world. Yet for all the jokes, monologues, and celebrity banter, there was one mystery no one ever solved. Who was the real Johnny Carson? Even those closest to him admitted that Carson's true self remained locked away, guarded like a national secret. After his death in 2005, whispers began to surface, hints of hidden pain, broken relationships, unspoken regrets, and choices he took to the grave. These are the 9 secrets Johnny Carson never wanted the world to know. That if this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. 1. The hidden farewell. In his final years, Johnny Carson made a decision that stunned everyone who had worked with him. He would never return to television. Not for an interview, not for a cameo, not even for a tribute to the show that made him immortal. For a man who lived and breathed the stage, this silence was deafening. When NBC begged him to make a final public appearance, Carson simply said, "I've done it long enough." It wasn't arrogance, it was philosophy. Behind that quiet exit was a man who felt trapped by the very fame he created. Friends later revealed that Carson believed every public goodbye cheapened the magic of his last goodnight. His final wave in 1992 was carefully choreographed to be the last image America would ever see of him. He had already started saying goodbye, not to television, but to the public version of himself. 2. The Joan Rivers betrayal. No story captures Carson's complexity better than his friendship and fallout with Joan Rivers. Rivers adored him. He gave her her big break, told her she was destined for greatness, and once said she was the only guest host he truly trusted. But in 1986, when Joan accepted her own late-night show on a rival network without telling Carson first, it shattered him. He didn't shout. He didn't negotiate. He didn't even ask why. He simply hung up the phone and never spoke to her again. Insiders later revealed it wasn't about competition. It was about loyalty, something Carson guarded like sacred ground. In his world, loyalty wasn't negotiable. Once it was broken, there was no coming back. When Rivers later tried to apologize, Carson refused. Even when she publicly wept over his silence, he stayed firm. His son once said, "My father could forgive almost anything except betrayal." It was a wound that haunted both of them for the rest of their lives. 3. The tragic family rift. Behind the scenes, Carson's family life was far from the calm he projected on screen. He was a devoted father in his own quiet way, but emotionally distant. A man who couldn't express love without a punchline. His marriages, 4 of them, ended in heartbreak. But perhaps most painful was his complicated relationship with his son, Rick Carson. Rick struggled for years with emotional issues and addiction, and though Johnny tried to help, he often did so from a distance. When Rick died tragically in a car accident in 1991, Carson was inconsolable. But true to form, he never spoke publicly about it. During one of his final broadcasts, he alluded to Rick only once, briefly, gently, and with tears barely held back. That single, fragile moment told audiences everything. To the world, it was a fleeting glimpse. But for Carson, it was the one truth he could never laugh away. 4. The secret mentor who shaped him. Before he was the king of late night, Johnny Carson was a shy Nebraska kid obsessed with magic tricks and radio comedy. But few know about the man who changed his life, Jack Benny. Carson admired Benny's timing, his stillness, his ability to say more with silence than words. What the world didn't know was that Benny mentored him privately, shaping his entire philosophy of performance. Carson often said, "The pause is where the real joke lives." That wasn't just about comedy, it was about control. That quiet, measured pause became his armor. It allowed him to dominate conversations without aggression, to diffuse chaos with calm. It also became his emotional shield, the very thing that kept people at arm's length. Benny gave him the tools to succeed, but unintentionally, he also gave him the tools to hide. 5. The War with Bob Hope. To the audience, Johnny Carson and Bob Hope were legends, two icons of comedy. But behind the curtain, things were icy. Hope, who had ruled television before Carson, often used his fame to hijack The Tonight Show for promotional appearances. Carson, ever the professional, tolerated it until he didn't. As the years went by, Hope's timing faded, and his jokes landed with silence. Carson felt trapped between respect for an aging legend and his duty to entertain. He once confided to a friend, "I can't get a real laugh when he's here anymore. It feels like work." Eventually, Carson began quietly limiting Hope's appearances. The feud never turned public, but the tension was obvious to insiders. When Hope died, Carson offered polite words on air, but friends noticed his tone, warm but distant. He respected Bob Hope, but he never forgot how it felt to be overshadowed on his own stage. 6. The unspoken struggle with mental health. Carson's charm was effortless, but the man behind the grin battled something darker, a lifelong struggle with anxiety and depression. He often spoke about the loneliness of fame in half-jokes, like armor wrapped in humor. Behind the scenes, however, he was deeply introspective and prone to self-doubt. Close friends recalled nights when Carson would sit alone long after the camera stopped, chain-smoking in silence, staring into space. One producer said he could command a crowd of millions, but when the show ended, he'd vanish into his own head. He avoided therapy, believing his control over emotion was part of what made him great. But in truth, that control came at a cost. It isolated him. His silence about mental health wasn't denial, it was survival. In an era where vulnerability was weakness, Carson's composure was his mask. 7. The private battle with fame. Most entertainers chase fame their entire lives. Johnny Carson spent his trying to escape it. After his retirement, he moved to Malibu, surrounded by ocean views and anonymity. He refused interviews, turned down documentaries, and even walked away from lucrative offers that could have cemented his legacy further. When asked why, he said, "Only happiness is more valuable than relevance." In his solitude, he found peace, reading, sailing, writing jokes he'd never tell. He sent some anonymously to David Letterman, who once revealed that Carson would occasionally fax him punchlines. He didn't want credit. He just wanted to make people laugh without being seen. That was the purest form of joy he knew, comedy stripped of ego, applause, or spotlight. He didn't retire from performing. He retired from being watched. 8. The mystery of his final days. When Carson was diagnosed with emphysema, only a handful of people knew. He refused interviews, refused pity, and refused to be photographed. Even his death in 2005 was quiet, as if planned with the same precision as one of his monologues. He left behind no public goodbye, no tell-all memoir, no grand message. But his friends later revealed that in his final months, he was reflective and serene. He told one, "I had the best seat in the house. I watched life from the front row." To Carson, that was enough. He didn't crave immortality. He believed his real legacy lived in the laughter he left behind, not the stories people told about him. Even in death, he chose control over how he was remembered and what remained a mystery. 9. The secret philosophy he lived by. If there was one truth that defined Johnny Carson, it was this: silence was power. He understood something few entertainers ever grasped, that mystery is a form of respect. By guarding his privacy, he protected not only himself, but the illusion that made him beloved. He once told a close friend, "If they know everything about you, they stop listening." That's why Carson never joined the Hollywood social scene, never opened up about his private life, and never let anyone fully in. He believed that to remain timeless, you had to stay just out of reach, enough for people to wonder, but never enough for them to fully know. It wasn't coldness. It was craft. It was the final, masterful performance of a man who spent his life perfecting the art of restraint. When the curtain fell on Johnny Carson's life, America didn't just lose a talk show host, it lost an era. He defined what it meant to be both public and private, to give everything on stage and nothing off it. In the years since his death, no one has truly replaced him. Not because no one's been funny enough, but because no one has been as mysterious. Carson once said, "Talent alone isn't enough. You need grace under pressure." That grace became his armor, his gift, and his secret weapon. His life reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of honesty isn't in confession, it's in silence. Johnny Carson mastered both. In a way, Johnny Carson never really left. His influence echoes in every late-night show, every monologue, every carefully timed pause that brings a laugh. But what he took to the grave wasn't scandal or shame. It was dignity, a kind of dignity that's rare today when fame demands constant exposure and confession. He understood that mystery isn't the opposite of truth, it's a part of it. And maybe that's why, decades later, we still find ourselves wondering who Johnny Carson really was. Perhaps he wanted it that way, because even in silence, Johnny Carson knew how to hold an audience.